Hi, welcome to the symposium Expanded Animation. My name is Jürgen Hagler. I'm a professor at the University of Applied Sciences, Hagenberg, Campus Hagenberg. I am also the chair of the symposium, and it's a pleasure for me to kick off the symposium. The symposium Expanded Animation started actually as a tiny symposium in 2013. Since then, the symposium addresses artistic and scientific positions in the field of expanded animation, in the field of art world and art world industry sector, but also from the R&D sector. So I'm very happy that we have this ongoing collaboration, and I will hand over to Gerfried Stocker, artistic director, sitting at the Johannes Kepler garden, actually.
Yes, we are here in the Kepler Gardens, as we call these wonderful premises here of the campus of the Johannes Kepler University, which is one of many centers of this year's festival. It's again a very big pleasure to welcome not only you as an audience, but in particular all the team around Jürgen Hagler and the Hagenberg University. It's a long-standing collaboration that really has helped us to put a strong emphasis on this very dynamic and interesting sector of computer animation or computer-generated images. We are really witnessing a huge revolution, the new tools that are now showing up with machine learning and the ever-growing performance of digital tools, computers, is really driving development in this field, no matter whether it's the commercial sector, the design sector, or the artistic one. And so I think the concept of expanded animation that was coined by Jürgen and his team several years ago is extremely timely and extremely relevant. And the program, together with the annual award Ars Electronica, the wonderful projects that come out from this award in the category computer animation, then wonderful facilities like the Deep Space in the Ars Electronica Center, where we can in particular feature virtual reality work. Or this year even, we have a very nice contribution from the Angewandte, the art university in Vienna. They came with a huge projection dome and a lot of interesting work. So animation, computer-generated imagery, of course, is booming. Visual language is the most important thing that we have to learn to deal with and to master. And I think this is what expanded animation is really helping and supporting. It's wonderful that in this huge network of 120 locations worldwide, we have again very strong partnership with University Hagenberg. And without any further ado, let's congratulate you to bringing together this really great conference, so many interesting contributors and speakers, even in the very difficult circumstances of the present Corona time. Even more so, really great success. Congratulations, and thank you very much for your wonderful collaboration.
Thank you, Gerfried. Yeah, it's really a pity. Unfortunately, we cannot meet each other at the festival. So we have decided very early in the preparation of this symposium that there is only a virtual symposium this year. And we are very happy that we have a collaboration with the University of Creative Arts, Farnham in London. So there is also a real hub on Sunday at the gallery Eclectic London. And we, of course, are connected to a lot of people spread all over the world, talking on the topic expanded animation. And this is quite interesting, a really challenging situation this year. I will briefly introduce this year's program. So as we already mentioned, it's an ongoing collaboration, the 8th edition of the symposium, and we have this very fancy title, The Appeal of the Analogue, and the symposium addresses the charisma, the attraction of animation in the context of performance, interaction, games, sound, and audio. And of course, digital analog are no longer seen as opposites, since all animation is moved through a computer anyway. At some point now. So the boundaries are blurring, but we thought that this is a very upcoming topic to address this new appeal or raised this question: is there a new appeal, charisma of analog within computer animation? We have a great lineup. We have 26 speakers, 3-day symposium. So we extended the conference plus 1 day, and we will start this day with artistic position, so with cutting-edge contributions from Reka Pucci, from Max Hattler and Eric O. The second day is dedicated to the topics real-time and art and industry, which is a topic that is tackled at the symposium since years. And there is also the pre-forum with a discussion, and also we conclude the second day on Saturday, with the online screening of the electronic theater, which is the selection of this year's winners in the category computer animation. In cooperation with the University of Creative Arts, we are tackling the question, the interaction between animation and audio from various perspectives. So researchers and artists were invited to submit contributions on the topic synesthetic syntax, sounding animation, visualizing audio. And this scientific artistic survey features a keynote presentation by media artist Rose Bond from Portland, Oregon, and followed by 3 panels discussing the topics hearing, color, seeing sound in front of your eyes and ears, and kinesthetics of music and vision. The symposium, of course, would not be possible without a great deal of support. So, Gerfried, thank you for this ongoing collaboration, but also thank you to our new partner at University of Creative Arts, Farnham, London. Thank you to the whole Hagenberg team, to my co-organizers, Jeremiah, Michael, Jake, Patrick, Christoph, Roland, Wolfgang, Alexander, and also Emiko and Nana from Ars Electronica team. Thank you to Begitter and his team at the University of Creative Arts. And of course to all the speakers and panelists that will make this symposium happen. So without further ado, it's a great pleasure to kick off the symposium, and I will hand over to my colleague Alex.
Yeah, hello and welcome to the first panel of the Expanded Animation Symposium. The first panel is the artist's position, something that we are very proud of every year. And in this year, we really found a way to bring together people that are very different in all their artistic work on the one hand. On the other hand, they have a lot of things in common. So at first, we will hear Reka Pucci makes movies from Reka Pucci. Then we will hear a talk from Max Hattler at 1700, the abstraction of real-world sources. And then after a break from about 90 minutes, we will see a talk from Eric O, talking about making of opera. And they all together rely on a very analog aesthetics. So they fit perfectly to this year's main theme. And they all use very uncommon narrative structures in the works. So they rely very much on the idea that the audience is willing to explore these animations. It's not just possible to consume them. You really have to be very aware and be careful when you watch them.
Next up there will be the talk from Max Hattler. And he's talking about the abstraction of real-world source. And I think that there will come up a lot of questions too after his presentation. But I would say, let's go into the talk.
Hi there, I'm Max Hattler. For this artist position talk for Ars Electronica's Expanded Animation Symposium, I'd like to talk about abstractions of real-world sources in animation. using my own works as examples. When we look at stop motion or photography-based animation, it is clear that meaning, at least some of it, is by default anchored within the real world, within the physical objects or spaces that were captured by the camera. But how do such photographic sources impact the viewer's reading when that work is abstract? Within my own animation practice, there is an important line of inquiry which deals with such abstractions of the everyday through photography-based animation. The use of real-world sources is interesting in this regard, as it brings with it the sources' associated stories, meanings, and materialities, which can then be amplified or subverted, deconstructed or abstracted. While my films are not narrative in a traditional sense, they are also never completely non-narrative. I would say that they narrate in a way which requires a different kind of viewer engagement. They require a proactive audience rather than the reactive audience of traditional cinema. My work invites the viewer to investigate and read it. Different readings are possible and encouraged, as the work functions more as an open-ended thinking space rather than transmitting a closed-off meaning. Related to this is the fact that my work cannot, at least not always, be classified as purely non-objective. Instead, fluctuating between the non-objective and recognizable realms, it functions within a broader notion of abstraction, an aesthetic that comes out of ideas of repetition, mirroring, shapes and textures, what Michael O'Prey calls abstracted, as opposed to purely abstract. By using patterning or mirroring, by rearranging objects, or by zooming into real images, formal aspects become highlighted and enable a distancing effect from the everyday, which can serve as a way of questioning, undermining, and commenting back on reality. My film Drift from 2007, for example, considers the human body as an alien landscape through close-up images of skin. Real photography, in extreme close-up, creates a foreign yet familiar world, removed from reality, yet sometimes almost too close. This tension is mirrored in the music. Original samples are exploded into a multitude of tiny elements before being reconstructed into a tight arrangement based on the Fibonacci series. The alienation effect works, I would argue, precisely because the film is rooted in, yet abstracted from, realism, real photographic source material. One film I rarely show, but that fits well into this discussion, is Hidden Particle. This work had its genesis in an investigation of the mundane elements of a specific site, which were subsequently transcended through abstraction. Hidden Particle was developed during an artist residency at Nida Art Colony in Lithuania in 2012. The work presents image and sound created from the same source, the Lithuanian seashore, and portrays an abstraction of the visual understanding of panoramic beach aesthetics through the use of an extremely wide frame. The fine details of natural elements culminate to create a scene where sea and sand collide and distort to emerge as noise. Offering this work as an alternative view on the sound and image of an untuned cathode ray tube television, where white noise creates a meditative noise bath that is both sonic and visual, Hidden Particle asks the audience to consider the audio and visual similarities between footage of natural elements and the experience of technology, while also hinting at the granular atomic construction of all matter. Another work of mine is inspired by constructivism and the Bauhaus, specifically the work of Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, whose interest in the movement of objects and light through space led him to construct the light space modulator, a kinetic sculpture. This mechanized, rotating, sculptural construction of metal plates with circular perforations wire and glass became the basis for the film A Light Play, Black, White, Grey, Moholy-Ner's only abstract film, completed in 1930. A Light Play became an influence on my abstract stop-motion Anat, made in 2008. Anat portrays a forever-changing view in which 3 weeks of real time are compressed into 5 minutes. Instead of narrative progression, the film's interest lies in the continuous transformation of objects and light and the perpetual folding and reconfiguration of space. The film shifts between three-dimensional objects and two-dimensional surfaces as it folds the illusion of space through the use of mirrors to give way to the abstract logic of tubes, discs, cylinders and other shapes as they scale, rotate and transform. By using a fixed viewpoint with no cuts or changes of camera angle, Anat is closer to a moving painting, a painting which at the same time keeps changing shape. It shows a configuration of abstract shapes which at the same time are located within a real space with interactions of sunlight, clouds and rain. I continued this thematic inquiry of everyday abstraction in 2 stop-motion animation works, companion pieces Model Starship from 2012 and Unclear Proof, made in 2013. Both films were initiated by external invitations, the former by a fashion blog with the brief to create anything I wanted with a bag of makeup products, the latter by Lago Film Fest, who invited me to make a short film of my choosing, using only objects found in a winery near the festival. Expanding Anat's mirror animation technique, both films are variations on a flying saucer theme, in which real-world objects are abstracted and transformed into the shape-shifting protagonists of an alternate reality. This allows the audience to reflect on the object's previous function and on the wider cultural and symbolic function of objects as a whole, through their recontextualization into a new otherworldly role. Ki-Young Park sees the reappropriation of everyday objects in Model Starship in the spirit of Duchamp's ready-mades. I quote, "Turning the familiar products into something new and creating a scene that you could see in a sci-fi movie by filming using their shapes and materials with images reflected from mirrors was sensational. The artist was able to produce images that are vague and abstract, but clear and concise at the same time. As he went through the process of observing the products, imaging and recognizing their patterns, bringing his imagination into action, he recreated ready-made products into an eye-catching art film. It gave me a refreshing jolt of the same kind as when Fontaine by Marcel Duchamp shocked the contemporary art world." End quote. I'm not sure if that's a bit of an overstatement, but it does draw out an important point, which is that an abstraction of real-world sources can create new meanings and new readings, while retaining traces of meaning of the source objects and materials that were photographed. As such, the work can comment on the function of objects and can draw on their associated meanings, while simultaneously questioning their role, transcending them into new configurations. Further, somewhat tongue-in-cheek context for the reading of these 2 films can be gleaned from their titles. Model Starship can be read as Toy Spacecraft, or as the struggle for a fashion model celebrity through makeup products. Unclear Proof, linking intoxication with hallucination, hints at the possible connections of levels of proof in alcohol and the existence of aliens. In contrast to the music-based Anat, these 2 works had their soundtrack composed to picture, allowing for extremely tight synchronization of the science fiction sounds, which support the recontextualization of the objects by underlining their abstracted otherworldly qualities. At this point, I would briefly like to talk about the science fiction theme that runs through some of my work. My interest in referencing science fiction stems from the genre's core premise. It presents a different version of the world, an alternative fictional framework through which to contemplate actual lived experience. As such, it offers a distancing from reality, which can be combined with the distancing effect produced by abstraction that I'm interested in. This can be seen in Model Starship and Unclear Proof, but also in Shift, which we will look at next. Shift is a 3-minute analog-based film from 2012, which combines science fiction themes through abstract stop-motion animation of objects and color. It was commissioned by Animate Projects in the UK for Channel 4's Random Acts short film strand with the thematic limitation 2012 Apocalypse. I proposed an abstract film inspired by the notion of a dimensional shift, a shift from our 4-dimensional reality into the 5th dimension, proclaimed by some New Age beliefs to happen at the end of 2012. Through this, I wanted to probe the idea of an other-dimensional, quasi-non-objective world with its own logic, aesthetics and rules, which conversely consists of real-world objects and materials. While my other stop-motion films feature abstracted scenes in real, discernible environments, what I wanted to do with Shift is to remove it further from reality, to increase the distancing effect produced by non-objectivism, while still keeping a connection to the everyday by animating real objects. On a black background, as if floating in space, the materials, including metal tubing, fixtures, pop rivets and ball bearings, present a self-governing mechanism that continually reshapes itself into new kinetic sculptural configurations, conjuring up abstract otherworldly automatons, pinball machines and cyborgian monstrosities. Setting a framework for the audience's imagination to explore, these transformations create anthropomorphic and mechanomorphic associations, which raise questions about the ambiguous moral nature of technology, while hinting at other dimensional machinations at work in the universe. Formally, Shift is once again inspired by the aesthetics of early 20th century modernism, linking it to the period's utopian impulse. Lissitzky, Man Ray, and films such as Ralph Steiner's tribute to the machine age Mechanical Principles from 1930, and Fernand Léger's Ballet Mécanique from 1924, which combines the dynamic abstraction of constructivism with the absurd qualities of Dada, all fed into the work. Next, I want to talk about 3 more or less recent photography-based films, which together constituted my solo exhibition at Goethe Institute, Hong Kong, exactly a year ago. The first one to discuss, and the oldest one in the show, is All Rot from 2015. This split-screen work was devised during an artist's residency at Atoll Kunstlabor in Germany. During the residency, I experimented with engaging with the immediate surroundings of the Atoll building, which is set within parkland inhabited by a series of mental health institutions, most of them high-security prisons. Using photography as the basis, my aim was to reintroduce tactile qualities, grit, texture and physical marks, as opposed to the completely virtual digital abstract works that I was mainly making at the time. I decided to take the abandoned mini-golf course just outside the Atoll building as my source material. Crazy Golf seemed strangely appropriate to the location. After photographing the golf course tracks in close-up, I proceeded to digitally reanimate the photographs into sequences, enhancing the dirty textures and worn paint marks of the golf course tracks through inverting and leveling the color channels of the image. At times, the surrounding background would become visible, breaking the abstract universe of the film and reintroducing a sense of place. As the work developed further, I began to eradicate all direct references to the place in favor of a completely abstract approach, led by the compositional and aesthetic qualities of Harry Smith's early abstractions and the paintings of abstract expressionist Barnett Newman. The introduction of physical marks and textures gives All Rot both filmic and painterly qualities, which bring it closer to Smith and Newman's work and create a more visceral experience for the viewer. All Rot operates within strict constraints, some of which are taken from Nidden Particle, such as using photographic reanimation as the basis for a site-specific exploration, and transcendence of the site through abstraction. As I mentioned, All Rot went through a progression from a more representational to an increasingly abstract engagement with the place, foregrounding formal qualities of shape, color and movement. Having tried revealing some of the surrounding site in my experiments, I found that this lessens the effect of the abstraction and makes the work about this juxtaposition with the real. My interest in this case, however, was in the transcendence of the site through non-objectivism. While the work remains physical through the marks and textures, it also becomes metaphysical through unbroken abstraction. Barnett Newman famously remarked that, and I quote, "The problem of a painting is physical and metaphysical, the same as I think life is physical and metaphysical, and that it is our function as artists to make the spectator see the world our way, not his way." End quote. A reference to the place remains in the title. Allrot is an anagram of Artol, the locus of the residency. It is also an allusion to decay, to the decaying abandoned mini-golf course, and to mental decay and the inevitability of death one is confronted with at Artol on a daily basis. We all rot, eventually. On another level, though, when understood in German, the title refers to the film's qualities of abstract shape and color, which conjure up associations of planetary movements, implying a transcendence of the earthly plane. The direct translation of Allrot is outer space red. In a strangely coincidental way, the title Allrot, when understood as Allrotate, also links to my RCA student film Everything Turns from 2004, a semi-figurative drawn animation inspired by Dos Grünbein's poem Vertigo, which emblematizes the futility and brevity of human life, while hinting, when presented as a loop, at the possibility of rebirth. The second work in the exhibition was Concrete Abstraction Road Triptych, which shows the street as a canvas and the structure of living traffic as wall-filling snapshots synchronized across 3 large monitors. Concrete Abstraction Road Triptych's technique of photographic reanimation and methodology of recontextualizing the locus of its inquiry borrows again from Allrot and Nidden Particle, but it also connects to my super short 2006 piece Striper version 0.1, an experimental film where photographs of pre-existing road markings are sequenced into an abstract moving canvas. The version 0.1 was always a hint and a motivator that more might be forthcoming. Concrete Abstraction had its first outing at my exhibition last year, after which it went back onto the operating table for some further improvements. The final version will be released in 2021, probably. The final work in the show, and the discussion of which shall conclude this talk, is Serial Parallels. Serial Parallels is probably the least abstract of the lot. It shows real, recognizable high-rises. When I relocated to Hong Kong 6 years ago, what struck me most was the drastically vertical, densely populated urban environment. Hong Kong's iconic housing estates have most impressively been captured by late German photographer Michael Wolf. In his Architecture of Density photo series, the architectural structures become protagonists rather than backgrounds. A dystopian patterned abstraction of the city as a mechanized social machine, an endless grid of modular machines for living. But seen from a distance, the structures involves photographs don't look too dissimilar from a series of celluloid film strips hung closely side by side on the wall of a 20th century editing room. Photography, presenting a fixed representation of the built environment, is an ideal medium to convey a sense of the scale of these repetitive patterns of Hong Kong high-rise buildings. Film, on the other hand, has the ability to go beyond such fixed representation, to tease out new narratives and ways of seeing and perceiving the city. Serial Parallels is heavily inspired by Wolf, but also by the film strip. In Serial Parallels, high-resolution photographs of building facades are reanimated through vertical and horizontal movements, with each floor or window corresponding to a film frame. By animating self-similar architectural structures, analogous to how movement is created by running celluloid film through a projector, the city is abstracted through motion. Concrete yet abstract. Concrete abstraction once more. What's interesting in working with photographs of buildings is that some buildings will be closer to the camera and others further away. When animated, this results in different speeds and directions of movement. Perspective distortion adds further complications to the image, making the buildings appear almost liquid at times. This spatio-temporal sequencing of architectural patterns reveals a different perspective on the city. What was fixed and literally set in stone in the single image becomes a reanimated film sequence of architectural flow. Now fluid and malleable, buildings fold in on themselves and start to move in opposite directions, and the temporal connections between buildings, created through meticulous editing, reveal the similarities and extreme standardization of Hong Kong's high-rise buildings. Revisioned in this way, the film can be read as a critique of social housing, a meditation on modernist architecture, a celebration of color, shape and movement, or warning of a dystopian near future to come. The reading remains with the viewer. I hope that this discussion has demonstrated how abstraction in motion can allow for more fluid readings. Abstraction can open up alternative spaces in which shapes, textures and movements suggest meanings. Abstract or abstracted work that is nonetheless based in photographic realism has the ability to draw on and to comment back on its sources. Animation, employing the aesthetics of abstraction in this sense, exploits ambivalence and ambiguity in the construction of more open-ended narratives that engage the viewer in a different way. Not non-objectivism as a complete negation, but abstraction of real-world materials as a way of undermining, injecting irony, questioning, or transcending the perceived realities of human existence. In an environment oversaturated with the same media images, representing things in a more abstract sense, while giving hints of meaning which feed the viewer's imagination, may be more engaging, at least for some people, by offering up alternative views.
Uns quasi aus und wir gehen schon rein.
Aber ist die Dokumentation von der...
Ist aus und wir sind schon da. Genau.
Okay.
Ja. Ja. Vielen Dank. Max Hattler ist heute jetzt sozusagen bei uns live zugeschaltet. Und ja, wir werden kurz ein bisschen reden über die Arbeiten, seine Hauptintentionen. Also, we'll talk about his intentions. I have to switch to English, sorry. About his intentions and the ideas behind his art pieces. I just want to point it out, he got an honorary mention this year for the last movie you saw, the excerpt of the movie, Serial Parallels, and we will talk about this later. So, yeah, welcome. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, here.
Yes.
Already. So yeah, we talked about different aspects of your work. So you pointed out in the movie, you pointed out this that you need this proactive audience. Maybe you can tell a little bit about what this means to be a proactive viewer, to explore your work. What is necessary for that?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be proactive, but I think yeah, it's just the way I think about the films that I make and the you know what they show can be interpreted in different ways. And usually what I try to do is to create some kind of open-ended space that engages with a certain idea, theme, formal exploration or exploration of objects or materials that is where the meaning is not so clearly fixed, and the audience is thereby sort of encouraged to, you know, come to their own readings of the work.
Yeah, conclusions. You also used at the very beginning this wording, the foreign familiar, and you talked about this distancy that is created by macroscopic, or let's say microscopic, pictures with the skin. Is this something that is one of the main topics of your works, this distancing?
I think when working with real world sources, I think that's always sort of part of it, that I look at or sort of investigate something that is of a real world origin, but then try to open that up through these, you know, abstraction strategies by looking at patterns within the materials, by maybe subverting their meaning through the use of sound, juxtapositions, so different abstraction strategies of zooming into something or zooming out, or you know, looking at like animating self-similar patterns, like in serial parallels, where that it changes the way we look at that material, and thereby kind of opens up new ways of engaging with that. Yeah.
I mean, you're really deeply in the ground of, on the one hand, I guess, the perception of the human. Also, how can we perceive things? How can we realize what we see is one part that is, I guess, very important for you as a starting point somehow. And on the other hand, you also go into ground because you use this very detailed view to things that we are not used to. So where do you start by your perception experiments? Is it really something you think about, or is it something you try out and look at it in a, I would say, experimental manner?
Yeah, I think the process is really very discovery led. Let's say experimental in the sense that I'm trying to work with the material and see what I can bring out, how I can transform what is there to create a different way of seeing that, and thereby also kind of opening up questions on, you know, the nature of the world, of how we understand you know, our surroundings, but the starting point usually is a very simple one, where I really just look at something and I think, oh, you know, what would happen if I play with this, or if I, you know, push it in this way, or I try to, you know, tease out some movement, or if I combine it with you know, different sounds, or yeah, you use some whatever strategy, and then I try, and then, you know, if it's interesting, then I will I'll continue, and then that kind of, you know, is the kind of the seed of a work that might kind of grow from that, or not.
I have comments here. Maybe I read it to you. Maybe you see it on your own. Also one is Serial Parallels was such an intense viewing experience. Then the question from the same person, Jean Vicary. How important to you is improvisation, and how do you incorporate that into your workflow? Improvisation and animation. Interesting question.
Yeah. I mean, I do kind of see my work in those terms, definitely. I also do audiovisual live performance, where the improvisation part really happens in real time, where it's really a kind of real-time improvisation. But then in animation, it's more kind of like a, you know, a very slow improvisation. But I think that the term still holds. And yeah, that is, I think, as I already mentioned, is a sort of discovery of working with materials, and then also, I guess, working within constraints. I think there's both for live performance and for any kind of animation, you know, moving image art making practice. I think that there's always this idea of working with constraints, and I think you can see that in all the films, that they all work with a kind of tight set of rules in a way. And those would be different for each work, but there's always a kind of, in retrospect, always a very kind of clear set of rules. But at the beginning of making a work, that beginning kind of moment is also the time when these rules sort of define themselves. You know, when you start working on something, and then you realize that, you know, a certain strategy would lead to a certain result, and that is interesting, then that strategy kind of becomes part of the framework within which the work sort of is allowed to progress. So, for example, in serial parallels, you know, all the movement is created from the sequencing of these self-similar patterns, i.e. the floors, the windows, and all the movement is generated from that. So one of the rules is that there's no compositing, there's no layering there. there was, that would not be allowed. Yeah. So to start taking things that
are really existed in this way. There's not one strip put to another.
No, the movement that you see of kind of things going different ways is really generated out of just the keyframes, scanning up or down a building, and then depending on the speed, it will depend, which one of these buildings would be static, which goes up, which goes down, and then you can change the keyframes and kind of start creating kind of choreographies from that. But to then go and say, okay, actually, I don't like this movement here, so I'm gonna cut it out and composite and layer. That would not be allowed in this case. Right now I'm working on a new film, which is a little bit too early to talk about, but at the moment we're still in this process of deciding whether we want to use layers or not, and it's still open.
You ask animators if they can use layers. It's a real big question, and it's important to have them. Maybe I can give you another question over by Birgitta Hauser. Who does your sound design, Max, and what process do you use to develop your soundtracks?
Yes, so this is a classic question, and I can only answer it by saying it's different people for different projects. There's some people that I go back to. For example, the sound for Serial Parallels was made by David Kamp, and who also made the sound for Shift. I worked with Eduardo Neuer on a few projects, with Jean-Gabriel Becker on a few projects. So I have a few people that I sort of they're my go-to people, where there's a kind of established a channel where they kind of know what I want and I know what they can do. I work with, I keep sort of moving around between different people. The process, so obviously there's some works that are let's say music videos, where the music comes first, like Anat, for example. The music came first, and then I worked to the music, and then a lot of the films in the talk, and a lot of them the sound came afterwards, and then I'm kind of quite obsessive with super synchronization of sound to image, but at the same time, I'm often looking for more abstracted soundscapes. So, some sound designers or composers kind of get a kick out of that and love that stuff, and then it's easy to work with. And then others, have different ideas of what sound design would be, and then it's hard to work together. But usually I would have a similar to the kind of visual kind of discovery process. I would have a vague idea, and then I would go through kind of iterations of trying to approach that, and then say, okay, yeah, this works, this really works, or that doesn't work, and then kind of revising and changing. On Serial Parallels, it was very difficult, because I myself had quite different ideas about the sound at the beginning, and I thought maybe it could be more musical and it could have different parts and kind of have kind of different themes in the sound, and so I was thinking about it in a very different way, and then later I realized, no, it shouldn't be like that, and it should be monotonous, and it should be this kind of thing that is just like almost killing you when you see it in the cinema. So yeah, also, I'm not always clear about those things, and a lot of that comes through just working through these things.
The process, yeah.
Yeah.
You pointed out something very interesting. I mean, your work at all is super analog, obviously. Yeah. But you pointed out this entanglement with reality, because your works are leading to abstraction, but you use objects that are kind of familiar. So what is the secret of this entanglement with reality? Maybe because it's something you are totally behind, it seems. As
yeah. So obviously the films that I showed for this talk those were basically all the films, or maybe almost all of the films that I made that have this kind of a engagement with real world sources. There's a whole other range of works that are kind of digitally sourced, that are CG or computer and 2D computer animation, but where the materials come from a virtual digital space that is not rooted within the real. And those films usually function, let's say, more on the level of visual music, of maybe, or some kind of maybe let's call it like trippy or spiritual kind of space, where this removal from the everyday kind of opens up possibilities for like what's the word? Yeah, like a kind of meditative or trippy kind of state, because your perception is like the real world is removed from your perception by putting you into a purely non-objective space, and I think that that can have connections to like psychedelic experience, or this other space, which I think is very interesting, because it takes you somewhere else, and thereby kind of opens you up for new experiences. But if the materials that you're working with are rooted in reality, if they're photographic sources, if there's a trace of the real world, the lived experience in there, then I think it has the ability to kind of question our existence, or our perception of the world, rather than this kind of closing off, but because it's if they work like something like All Rot, for example, it's on the one hand there are the real world sources which kind of leave kind of traces of a story, or maybe even if you don't see it visually, there's kind of a backstory, but at the same time the visual experience is still has this this kind of quite pure abstraction that kind of takes you out of the everyday. And then there's like works like Serial Parallels, I think would be like the most figurative, but through teasing out these kind of movements and this materiality that becomes very different from how we perceive it normally, again, it kind of opens up the different readings. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say thank you for this talk. We are quite on the end. I heard here. There could be going on with questions and questions. So I wish you all the best to Hong Kong. And thank you for your time and the great answers and the presentation. And hope we see us again in face-to-face, or maybe in this way. Thanks a lot, and all the best.
Great.
On the other side of the world. Thank you.
Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, we will leave it here, and Jürgen will write you.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
So. Ja, also wir sind jetzt sozusagen, we are on the end of the first part of the artist's position. Out of time reasons around this planet, we have to wait now about to 7 p.m. or 1900. Then we will have a presentation of Eric O, who will talk about his latest work, which is an 8K installation showing the principles of the human life, nothing else than this. So stick around, and we will be back at 1900 or 7 p.m. and all the best. Bye-bye.